All right. Well, hi again, everyone. A very warm welcome to the seventh and final session of our Translational T-Cell Talks event. I'm Liam Sanyu from the events team at scientist.com, and I'll be your host here. And so just to introduce the panelists, I'm sure you know Lynn, who was speaking at the last event, and also Dr. Julian Lum, whose presentation you might have seen earlier. But we also have two new faces. We have Dr. Patrick Hanley, who's Chief and Director of the Cell Therapy Program and also Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the Children's National Hospital, and also Dr. Nushin Tabetabei Zavarat, who's Associate Director of the Immune Cell Culture at Stem Cell. So this event won't really follow the same structure as the other events, but will rather be a roundtable discussion on collaborations in the CAR-T space, and also challenges and opportunities, and then a bit about navigating the regulatory and material qualification challenges to cap things off. All right, shifting over to see our beautiful faces. But the first discussion here will be on the existing collaborations in the CAR-T space. So Julian, we can start with you. So at the beginning of your presentation, you shared a slide showing some of your current collaborations. What do you think the most important thing is when building a successful partnership? And what are some of the main benefits of these collaborations, and how is it helping the cell and gene therapy field moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Liam, and welcome everyone to this session. I think that, it's really integral and essential that academics and industry and other partners, work across their respective sectors. I think we each bring assets that really will help us advance the cell therapy field as a whole. And I can speak to, kind of where I've worked very closely with stem cell around some of these ancillary products, media formulations. And, this is something that as academics, we don't have the ability to, for example, create, specific formulations of medias that contain specific metabolites, specific concentrations. This would be a really challenging endeavor for academia to pursue. And so I think that's where, working with industry partners, we can not only begin those kinds of testings, but also, be able to leverage the whole engine that they have and kind of be the beta testers of some of the new products that are coming online. And then, of course, when you move all the way sort of from the preclinical more towards the clinical implementation, working with CGMP grade material, again, something that's very challenging for academics to pursue. And I would say, my initial interaction with stem cell was actually at a Canadian national conference, the Canadian Society for Immunology, where I gave a talk, and one of the representatives was in the audience, and we just had a conversation afterwards. And I think that, that kind of networking is really important to be able to allow the academics to present work, but also for the industry partners to understand, what are the sort of new innovative ideas that are coming out, and then begin to cultivate, that partnership. And I should also mention that, these partnerships don't necessarily have to have, shall we say, dollars and cents attached to it. It's really scientific, and also being able to, share the knowledge and the reagents that we've been able to access. So I think those are, kind of the elements that I would start with when considering collaborations with industry. Yeah.
Excellent. Next question here that we have is for Dr. Zevra. So I know you're involved in developing some new products. So what are some of the things that you're looking for in a partner or collaborator, and how are these collaborations helping shape the development of the products?
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much, Julian, for your comments, because it very much confirms what I'm about to say. When we develop products, we get our cues from scientific community. We attend conferences. We regularly scan literature and publications. So we look into problems that researchers are trying to solve, and they fall within our goals. So, like any other collaboration, we basically look for opportunities where we can complement our tools and solutions for a comprehensive workflow. Because let's say cell and gene therapy is really complex workflow, and it's hard to tackle all steps in this workflow. So we know we have, as Julian alluded to, we have ancillary material where we can support culture and expansion. We have isolation reagents, but the academic labs may be working on a specific target for gene therapy, for gene editing, and that's where their focus is. So where we come in and we provide our solution and reagent in order to actually come with the final output, which is a huge scientific discovery. And I think that's where the advantage comes in. So in this collaboration, when we often, I think it looks like Julian, we often look for similar goals in this case to complement on each other's skill set, let's say. And in terms of when we develop product, it's actually quite useful, those collaboration, because we use collaborators as a feedback loop to make sure the product we developing actually improves. We'd like to improve the performance, so based on the feedback we actually can go back and improve the product when we want to make sure it actually meets the needs of the collaborator and technically needs the market field. And that's how basically we can contribute to the whole field. And I think this is very much in line with what Julian said. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you, Dr. Zevra. All right. Shifting focus a little bit to more the scientific and technical sides, to the advancements necessary to enhance these CAR T cell therapies. So, Patrick, we haven't heard from you. Maybe we could start with you, and then I think, Julian, you'll probably want to add something on, I'm sure.
Yep. So sorry, Liam, were you asking what challenges I've seen?
More about the scientific and technical advancements necessary to enhance the CAR T cell therapies.
Oh, okay. Yep. Sorry about that. So I think right now we have tried to force a very, very personalized medicine into the paradigm that we've always used for commercial drugs, pharmaceuticals. And I think we've seen that that has resulted in astronomical prices and also limited access to patients. I think I'm so glad that we have these therapies commercialized, right? I think that's fantastic, but we need to do a better job of getting these into the patients that are in need. We've heard CAR T cell companies say that, we're only treating 10 to 20% of the patients that we thought we would by this point. And part of that is because of access, and part of that is because of cost. And so those are some of the challenges that we face. And I think where I see the field moving, and I'm biased, but is point of care manufacturing. So can we do this manufacturing in a different way? Can we have academic centers manufacturing these, or regional hubs that can then distribute to community hospitals or outpatient centers? And I think in order to do that, we need new tools, we need new technologies. And so that's where some of these advancements are coming. I think earlier we talked about some of the partnerships that are needed. And I think part of it is meeting the partners where they are, right? And so if we've been doing this for 12 years at Children's National. I was doing it for 7 years before that. Maybe we don't need a very, very, very automated device to try and innovate something in a phase 1. But if you're going to a site that has never done CAR T cells before, maybe something like the Prodigy or any of these other devices that have just come out is a good option, especially if you can provide those sites with a CAR, if you can provide them with the testing that they need and train them on how to do that. And so those to me are good partnerships, is understanding what's needed. So I've given you an idea of what sort of the technologies that are coming about are. I think there's probably 20 other things that we can talk about, but that's the one that I'm most excited about. And maybe after Julian chimes in, I can circle back.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. Those were really great comments. I certainly appreciate the point you made about further accessibility of the products and more wide sort of uptake. There's a comment here in the chat about maybe I'll just quickly summarize this. Can the decentralization production by academia exist and coincide sort of with the centralized model that pharma companies are using now, and will that solve kind of the pricing issues? Yeah, I think there's space for both. And, at the moment, we're still making these therapies as an autologous product, right? And there are certain advantages of decentralized or point of care model that Patrick was alluding to in that setting, versus, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to deploy allogenetic products, which may be more amenable to a more centralized kind of a situation where it's, off the shelf. So I think, depending on the indication, because CAR T cells at least are moving into different spaces outside of oncology, there could be definitely a hybrid, right? You have an academic scenario and you have a more centralized scenario, and so I think that's really important. And one thing I really challenge the field is along this point about collaboration. The CAR T cell field, of course, has been really driven by the hematological malignancies. And that's not to say that we can't or we won't, and I'm sure there are lots of great ideas to make inroads into the solid tumor field. But that's going to require more time and more basic science and more fundamental research to sort of uncrack that conundrum, if you will. And, we hope that both industry and academia will continue to make investments in the fundamental research so that we can make advances in that, and hopefully the motivation will continue despite still having this barrier in the solid tumor world. So and I'll maybe turn it back over to you, Patrick, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, Julian, I think you made a lot of good points. I completely endorse this hybrid model. I think we need to have larger companies who can mass produce these things, right? I think to help drive innovation and fund the infrastructure that's required. I mean, huge thank you to Novartis and Kite, who really created this infrastructure that allowed for what's happening today. Because there was a major investment. We didn't have these portals. We used to have, when we first trained on Kymriah, we had 713 people from our hospital trained on REMS because that's what we thought it required. It's a lot different now, right? We understand what this looks like, but that infrastructure was created because of these companies. And so, we don't want to disincentivize that. But I think maybe for smaller or more rare indications, maybe there's a need where you have a couple locations that can do that manufacturing. I did also want to touch on the economics of this. So if we do this the same way, but also at 100 different manufacturing sites, there's no way that the costs are going to go down. Completely agree, and I've heard that argument made. But the difference is going to be it's not going to be the same model, and so that will drive down the costs. It won't be through a necessarily large pharmaceutical company. Maybe there's a way to license those assets to different manufacturers, and they can manufacture it on site. There's just different ways to do this, and I think, to be honest, Europe is leading the way on how to do this differently that will help drive down costs.
Yeah, great point. And maybe just one last thing I'll mention, because there might be people chiming in from different jurisdictions around the world. It's really important to also remember that whatever system is in place, it has to sync with the healthcare system of that jurisdiction. So Canada, we operate on a different model and a different platform for delivery of healthcare compensation, right? The payouts, and so I think those are also important considerations depending on what jurisdiction. Just again highlighting the economics, Patrick, that you spoke to.
Great point.
Yeah, definitely. Really great points, Julian and Patrick. Thanks a lot for the insights. All right, another one here about ISCT. So I'm sure a number of you were at ISCT. So I'll throw the question out there. Did any of you, hear about any new initiatives or any interesting conversations at that conference addressing these challenges?
Maybe I can jump in. So first of all, I'm rotating off as the vice president of North America for ICT. So sad that I won't be in that position any longer, but I know we're in good hands with Yap Mullins. And then Soumya was actually just elected VP elect, and I know that she's Canadian. So there's a couple of things that I was hearing. So first of all, I think there's a lot of new technologies and tools that were announced at ISCT. So I'm going to try and do my best to remember all of them. I'm sure I'm going to leave a couple off, but so Ori Biotech had their big reveal of a new bioreactor. So that's exciting. Cytiva came out, and they also had a bioreactor that they developed with a lot of feedback from Kite, and going back to the meet your partners where they need you. And I think that was definitely more focused on just cranking out products. I think Excel Bio came out with a new bioreactor. Autonomous came out with a free builder for a software platform. I have a COI, just to make that known. And then the last one, I think, was BioLife Solutions came out with a new freezing cartridge bag. So a lot of new things that have come out, and I think a lot of those are done in partnership with academic centers or companies to make sure that it fits a need. And I think we heard some of the other speakers talk about, we develop a product based on what the need is in the field. You do a lot of surveys and client feedback, right? And so I think that's a key part of developing these new technologies. So that's what I was excited about. There's a lot of point of care manufacturing discussions as well, but I'll let others speak to what they heard.
Alrighty. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Yushin.
I just have actually a question for Patrick or Julian, because this idea of having multiple sites and now there are multiple tools, how do you standardize across all the sites? I know, I guess those quality tests, potency assay, whatever they are, and I think this is a whole new field that actually we'd like to understand too. But how is there a plan to standardize across all these sites, and how are we going to do that? I think Patrick or Julian.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Liam, I'm taking this question or giving this question.
No, this is the best way these things go, I think. Proceed. So there's a couple different models. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you have a licensed model, for example, maybe it's the responsibility of that site to demonstrate that they have the proper systems and then go for approval. So that's one model. Or there's the regional model, and I think you're seeing this now with Galapagos, and they have Landmark Bio, I think, doing their manufacturing. And I think what they're claiming is that because we use the same devices at each of these sites and they're set up the same way, they undergo the same training, they may not need to do the same level of standardization. Well, it is standardized, but comparability, it's always the word we don't want to say, between sites, right? And I'm not privy to that information or what the regulators are saying, but I think that is one discussion that people are saying, is that if you have like a hub that does their own qualification and then they show another site how to do it, maybe they don't need to do that. I'm not saying that's how they're doing it. But.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add quickly to that from a scientific point of view. I actually feel like having sort of these variety of platforms is a good thing, because we need to learn at a fundamental level, what are the conditions, what are the protocols, what are the systems that will produce the most efficacious cells. And again, efficacious really depends on the indication, right? If you're treating a hematological cancer versus a solid cancer versus an autoimmune disease versus something else, it could mean different things. And I think that so as an example, for many decades prior to all of these technologies, we were using the rapid expansion protocol, developed by Steve Rosenberg at the NIH, and that was the gold standard, if you will, for sort of expanding cells from patients. And we learned that many things about what that kind of expansion produces. And so I think having all of these different platforms allows the science then to really learn more about what is making products of a phenotype or a characteristic or a profile of X versus Y, and then how do we iterate, right? How do we improve upon those for the particular indication that we want? So I actually don't consider it from a standpoint of the scientific understanding and knowledge. I actually think it's going to help us learn a lot of different things.
Yeah, and having all of those different technologies means that it can be more automated, right? There is more competition to do that, and that is the standardization that you were asking about, Yushin, which is needed for us to do this. Because if these people have to manufacture it by hand, it's going to have way too much variability, and I think that's one of the things that we have been discussing, as well as the QC testing. I think the QC testing is still a bit too challenging, and it's not automated enough, in my opinion.
Excellent. Yeah. So, Patrick, another one actually for you here. So you've been part of the CGT field now for more than 16 years. What are some of the challenges? I mean, you have touched on this a bit already, but some of the challenges that you've seen in the field when it comes to collaborations between different organizations?
I think the biggest thing is trust, right? I think any legal contract, it can be rock solid, but if there's not trust between the two parties, it's going to fall apart, right? And I think that's true no matter what. The second thing is both parties need to understand that it has to be mutually beneficial. So if you're going to come to me and you want to work with us because of our name, like, we have to get something in return. It might be access to a new bioreactor, or it might be capital, or it might be talent. Whatever it is, we have to get something in return. And sometimes that's just the ability to publish, right? But I think that you need to understand that, and it goes for both sides. I mean, I also need to understand that a company may want to provide us with this tool, but they're not willing to do a sponsored research agreement, and that's fine. I think also control can be an issue, right? So especially in the academic setting, we probably want to publish on this, and I don't want to give away the rights for you to quash all of our work just because it's not favorable for your device. And I think it's really unethical to want to do that. You might want to review it, right? But you do not have the rights to prevent us from publishing that work. And I think hopefully you're not putting tools out there that are not going to work. But we have an interest in publishing the work. So those are some of the things that I've seen. I did also want to highlight another partnership that I think is really exciting, and I'm not associated with them, but Caring Cross. I don't know if you guys have heard about them, but they're also pushing the envelope with decentralized or point of care manufacturing. And they have signed agreements recently with the Brazilian government and also the Indian government to increase access to these CAR T cells in a cost-effective way. I think they're looking to do it for less than $27,000 or $30,000. And they're basically providing the vector, the manufacturing. They are collaborating with partners like Acelix. And again, I don't know the details of how these things work. I've just seen the PowerPoints. But these companies are really enabling them, plus their creativity and sort of forward thinking, to help increase access to patients in need globally. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. Maybe one small point I'll add to that, just from the, again, scientific side of things, is, I think it's important to have a contractual relationship to spell out kind of those key points of, what will be done, should there be, intellectual property coming out of some scientific endeavor between two parties. I mean, there needs to be some clear understanding. I fully agree, Patrick. You need to work with people who you have mutual trust and you know I do think that there is room for improvement around sort of the business offices, because they often um, will receive a contract without context, right? This is from a scientist in our organization. What are they doing? Why are they working with this company? What do they want out of this? And I think internally we need to do a better job. But also, when the time comes to have those kind of contractual negotiations, we really need to find a way to streamline that, because they can often take a long time, especially bigger projects, and where there's exchange of material, exchange of data, exchange of resources, and they can often bog down the science, unfortunately. But I think they can also facilitate, and I really feel like we need to work on the sort of organizational pieces that make sure that we truly understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, what we want to get out of it, rather than maybe circular discussions that sometimes happen when not all the parties really understand what's going on, or what the goal and thrust of the project is. So, that's one area I hope that everyone can think about streamlining.
And if I can chime in, I think Patrick brought up a very good point, and we often have quite a bit of IP as well that we would like to protect. But with collaborators, we often work case by case, because we understand and knowing some of the information is the key to their success. So we work with them on a case by case basis when the information reasonably needed. I think that should be basically and done under agreement, and help collaborators as much as we could. And I hope the other organizations do the same. But I agree with Julian, with you, that we actually do our best not to delay those types of agreements. But it could benefit because we see delay on the other side, and sometimes that's um, makes it, let's say, make the collaboration difficult.
Yeah, and I have heard that. I was shocked to hear that some companies have worked with well-known cell and gene therapy institutions, and then they just never give them feedback about how the device or the media or whatever it is
Mhm.
works, and they don't publish that, which I think is completely unfair, because that's why we entered into this agreement in the first place.
Transparency is part of it too. So if that's what the feedback comes in, you expect from collaborators data and feedback so you can improve, and we take those feedback seriously. I don't think anyone wants to put out something that has flaw. We should always put the best solution forward.
Excellent. Yeah, some really, really good points thrown out. So thanks, everyone. Moving on to a slightly different topic, we could talk about mentorship a little bit. So what role does mentorship play in fostering collaborations in this particular field? Does anybody want to share their experience with that?
Yeah, maybe I'll kick it off here. So, this is one of the most gratifying things that I do in my job, I feel. When trainees come to the lab and they're very excited about the work, and I think I've tried my best to involve all of the trainees in the collaborative research projects, attend the meetings with our collaborators, whether it be academic or industry. And oftentimes, they end up going to industry after they've graduated. And I think that's, a sign that, we've been successful in, getting the younger generation into the field. And so I think, you know, um, we need to continue to do that. Science, no matter where it's being done, is challenging and difficult. And we want to see that we're continuing to prime the pump, so to speak, with talent and innovation. And then the other thing that I will say is, I guess I can say this now, like generationally, I'm very impressed by, the thought process that goes into a trainee's thinking about a project. They're not just thinking about the science. They're actually thinking about things that you highlighted, Patrick, like accessibility, EDI, um, you know, all of these really critical things that I think are really complementing and enriching the science that we're doing. And I think learning from them as well as imparting our sort of wisdom, if you will, has been a real highlight for me, because it's changed the way that I've thought about many projects. And then finally, I just want to say, maybe not so much in the mentorship role, but the partnerships. I think that one of the key components of partnership is the patient advocate voice. And not only those that might be survivors, but those who are caregivers, those who are people involved in the cancer journey, involved in, um, receiving or being part of the whole cell therapy treatment. The things that you hear are often quite illuminating. So, as an example, as a scientist, we're always thinking about, okay, how do we improve? How do we make this therapy more efficacious? And when you really have a deep conversation and you sit down with these patient groups and voices, they want to know how to make it. How to make these therapies, less risky for them, less, the side effects. Um, how do they prepare their loved ones or their family members for, what's going to happen next? And I think from a holistic standpoint, that's a really crucial piece of, the whole mentorship and partnership of cell therapies in general. And I think that's been something that I've really been gratified to be part of, you know,
Yeah, I'll jump in. And yeah, it is definitely a joy, as Julian laid out, that mentorship is definitely a great part of growing the next layer of talent. And if you read anywhere in this sector, there is such a shortage of specific talent that is required. And by sharing our experiences, we can help with this a little bit. And I think the other thing too, like when I look at the mentorship of people that are coming, let's say, straight out of school and joining, and them sort of adopting what the requirements are, the framework of thinking that is required for manufacturing under GMP. But we at Stem Cell, we hire people from the pharma industry, and they bring perhaps a very rigid, uh, unadaptable uh, sort of mindset to ancillary materials, which also isn't the right way to go about it. So I find that from a mentorship perspective, I have the opportunity to sort of bring people forward, but also, be able to loosen people's minds as well, because again, we're at the infancy around our learnings for CGTs, and we have to be very adaptive and flexible, and always absolutely keeping the patient in mind and safety and efficacy. But the way we do it, the strategies, they need to be adaptable for the whatever situation that is proposed. So not thinking in a black and white sense, but really embracing the gray.
So I'll jump in and say I've had fantastic mentors my entire life, and I'm so grateful for that. Whether it be college, getting my first research project, or graduate school, where Kath Ballard and John Rogers were my mentors, and Kath Ballard is still my boss today as the interim chief academic officer here at Children's National. But I think what you quickly realize is that it's mutually beneficial, right? Because once they can trust you to take on additional work or an additional speaking opportunity, it kind of amplifies their presence, right? And I see that now, and I'm grateful to have a great team now. But I think it also increases the collaboration because they can do more things. And so I look back when I was training under Adrian G and how to run a GMP facility at Baylor College of Medicine. And our project was a collaboration with Terumo. So we had the quantum cell expansion system. It was just released. And my project was growing mesenchymal stromal cells and comparing them to cell stacks or flasks. And we published that paper. And to this day, it has 162 citations. It's not groundbreaking research, but I thought it was a pretty good study comparing the two. And so that was great exposure for Terumo. It was a nice partnership from our perspective. I got to present on it, and it kind of set the stage for the rest of my career. And Adrian kind of oversaw all that. So that's how I see mentorship being connected to the collaboration, because you can just do more. And then you take the next step and you become the mentor.
And I just want to chime in here that some of the programs, I think we have MyTax in Canada, for example. That's a great program that actually tries to bring industry and academia together. So the trainees sort of have a half time in industry and half time at the lab, and they experience supervision by both the academia partner and industry. And that's a great example that this actually gives them a whole view of what's going on, and it very benefit, let's say from our point of view, great opportunity to get an academic lens on our project. We love those projects, let's say, because so some of those very successful projects comes out of those. So that's sort of universities could basically enhance that experience with programs like that. So we love my tax program. There are other programs like co-ops, a little bit different, but again, these co-ops move around from lab to academia, and then later on, it's very interesting where they end up. And I think whatever they do, those co-ops have great experience, and they can contribute to some of these groundbreaking projects.
I love the idea of a co-op or apprenticeship. I think in the manufacturing realm, that's absolutely what we need.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for sharing your perspectives on mentorship. Some really, really interesting things there. All right, shifting gears a little bit to the discussion on regulatory, maybe. So, Lynn, we haven't heard from you much, so we can talk to you about it. But maybe you can discuss a little bit the importance of regulatory compliance and material qualification in translational research.
Yes, that is a space that is continuing to grow. I think, 10 years ago, we would have, customers that would come, would actually not come to us, and they would submit their IND. And then, of course, the FDA or other regulatory agency would ask them a litany of questions, and then they'd rush back to us, and then of course they couldn't progress forward. So that has really dwindled down, and that people are engaging the suppliers earlier and earlier, which is critical. And it's really a partnership. As I mentioned in my talk today, there are no specific regulations for ancillary materials, or other known as raw materials, reagents, but there are some guidances. But those guidances are really just frameworks. So it's not saying this reagent must be X. It really is just a framework on how to sort of assess the material, qualify the material, and de-risk it as much as possible. And you can't do that in isolation, neither a sponsor nor a supplier. So it really is a collaborative process. And we draw upon the drug regulations, the device regulations, and we, claim to be compliant to the required GMPs. And but we will be very transparent with our customers to say which ones we comply with, what parts we don't comply with, etc. And it really is a conversation. So I can't emphasize that enough. Is to engage with your supplier as early as on, even preclinical. Especially preclinical, I think, because you don't want to be changing a whole lot as you progress through the translational journey. So really just have that conversation. We have experience. We have direct contacts from the regulators. We have experiences with other customers, and we will share not the names of the customers, but we will share our experiences so that we can help guide your qualification process. So Yeah, I would love to hear from the other side, the end users, either Julian or Patrick.
So I can comment on a couple of things. First of all, I think I've always been impressed with how many of these different vendors work side by side with us, including Stem Cell, to try and get clearance from the FDA and on our path anyway. And so that's great. Thank you, and thank all the vendors, because it's, we can do whatever risk assessment we want, but at the end of the day, we don't know what the FDA's current thinking is, or what their experience has been with other programs that we don't have, we're not privy to. Second of all, what you're saying about GMP really resonates with me, because we use a lot of overlapping peptides, and people will go to these companies and say, we need the GMP peptides, and they're like, these are not GMP peptides, right? Like, you tell us the specs, we'll make them to that, we'll do line clearance or whatever you want, but like, we're not calling it GMP peptides. And people get turned off and say, oh, we can't make these with peptides. And it's like, that's not the message, right? And that's not the message with any of these ancillary reagents. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Lynn. That's been our experience.
Yeah, and I'll just feed back into that. Whatever's on the label, the regulators don't care. They don't give credence to what's on the label. They give credence to the documentation that you have gathered to demonstrate the qualification for your application. So if you see that it's GMP on the label, don't give yourself a pat in the back and think you're going to have an easy road ahead. No, no, no. It's great. It's hopeful, and hopefully that once you qualify it, it stands its ground. But it's not just an easy checkbox exercise. It's something that you have to dig into, qualify, because when the FDA comes knocking on your door and one has questions about why you chose that, you're going to have to answer them. And then sometimes, as Nushin mentioned, we're not going to share all of our IP. Unfortunately, a lot of it isn't protected. So we have to be careful with that. But we do submit master files for Canada as well as the US. And in other jurisdictions, we use regulatory support files that we will submit directly to the regulators to protect that IP, but help you. So we definitely, again, it's a conversation. We're not going to hold all our cards close to our chest. We will only succeed if you succeed. So we definitely, again, just emphasizing that collaboration and communication and conversation.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much, Lynn and Patrick. It looks like we're just about out of time. And so before we close things out, I'd just like to ask if there's anybody had any final last statements you wanted to give, or any closing remarks.
I'll just say, going back to the theme of partnerships, I think we've made a lot of progress in this field because of these partnerships, whether it be UPenn with Novartis, or you can just go down the list. We personally have made a lot of progress because of them. So please, keep coming to us. We're open to partnerships, and it's going to help advance the field if each of us can work together.
Yeah, I'll just say, sorry, thank you so much for having us. And yeah, just again, if you have any further questions around qualification process, I love to talk about this. So you can reach out to Stem Cell anytime.
So Lynn, and I guess Patrick as well, and the others, what's the best place that people can reach you if they do want to make these connections?
Patrick, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, you can add me on LinkedIn, you can message me on LinkedIn, or you can email me. Probably easy to find online.
And I'm going to piggyback on that. That sounds like a perfect way to connect. I'm not going to read out my email address. That'll be too confusing.
We also have provide support, technical support team that questions can be sent, and we can get those requests through that as well.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, no, it's really been such a pleasure having you all with us. So as we come to the end of our translational T-cell talks, I'd just like to extend a really heartfelt thank you to all the speakers for really their excellent presentations and valuable insights, and their contributions have really made this event just really successful and a lot of fun to be part of. Also want to express our gratitude to all of you, our attendees, for joining us today. Your active participation and engagement also really made this event a success. And we hope you found the sessions really informative and helpful for your work. Last but not least, this event would not have been possible without Stem Cell Technologies for sponsoring and helping to organize this event. So a really big thanks to them as well. We hope you enjoyed the sessions and that you all leave today with at least a few good new ideas. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you again at the next Scientist.com and Stem Cell Technologies event. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.